Hey everybody, it's Matthew. We're back here at the desk to talk about some stuff on here. Going to do something different. We're going to look at a list today. Music lists are always fun to look at and react to. Full disclosure, the one we're looking at today, I have already seen, so this isn't a live breakdown of this, but we're going to check it out anyway, have some fun, let you know my thoughts on this thing today. Hopefully we can do more content like this in the future. The last video and the next one coming up after this one, these have kind of been a little bit more low effort videos just because I'm going to be out of town for a bit and I'm trying to get some extra content done so I have things ready to go for when I am gone. Anyway, we're going to get right into this list here today. And what we are looking at is the 10 strongest voices in alternative music from What Culture. And this is a pretty good site for this stuff. They've got a lot of music lists, so I have a pretty good supply of content here if I want to look at these further. Anyway, of course, you see who's on the front cover here. We'll talk about that later, most likely. Of course, they're talking about things like charisma, great singer who's vocal point and great identity. There's going to be a lot of grunge guys on here, but that is okay. And the first one up is Scott Weiland. I mean, this is number 10. You could really put any alternative singer here and it would be fine, you know. You want to do that? You want to do Billy Corgan or whatever, you know, that's fine. Do that. Even what the guy from Coldplay, I don't remember. You could put him at 10 and no one would probably care. I'm kidding, someone would probably care. I forgot his name, by the way, but Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots. I don't really think there's anything wrong with this. He's a pretty consistent singer, and with, you know, Core and Purple, those are always great. Good distorted vocals. He's really good at that compression in the middle of his range. And that's something that does seem simple, but is not that easy to do. And of course, the Velvet Revolver stuff, which I don't know much about, but I imagine it's similar things. Of course, I mean, he expanded his singing style a bit and went for a little bit more abstract things, especially with Shangri-La-Di-Da, which was the last album they did together. And so that's a solid one. Keep looking. Mark Lanegan is a super underrated singer in my opinion because he's got that great deep smoky voice, which often, you know, some of that is he did smoke a lot. So that's some of it. But there aren't a lot of guys with a voice that deep as his. And he can cover a lot of ground. He can do regular distorted stuff. That he can also be very sweet and subtle with his voice, which can be hard to do with when you have as solid of a baritone voice as he does. But he can use falsetto a little bit. He can get up there a little bit. He doesn't have a massive range, but it's pretty good considering how much depth he has. Forgot to say he was in the band The Screaming Trees, and of course helped out with the Mad Season album Above, and was picked, of course, by Lane to help do that. And he worked with Queens of the Stone Age on their first 3 albums as well. That's a solid pick to me. And there's a lot of guys you could stick in here though. That would be totally fine. Chester Bennington, I think, is fair. At number 8, I'm not really into that. I think he should be higher because he is just above 2 guys that he probably outpaces in vocal skill quite a bit. So I agree with him on the list, but I don't agree with the placement. That's my biggest problem. Of course, you know, Chester's known for his very sweet and soft, clean voice, and then his absolutely out of control screams and fry and all that stuff, which is a very large dichotomy there between 2 things. But often when you have a singer that does extreme things, they actually tend to sound better than someone who can't really go between extremes. So you tend to have better power and just better character as a singer. And of course, he's just a solid, you know, belter all around, which can be rare to find in alternative music, someone who's really good at belting. So I think he should be higher on this. Mike Patton is a definite one. Should also be higher. In fact, he's probably on this list the most talented singer, even though he's not as well known as a lot of the other ones because of his capability to do so many different things with, you know, Mr. Bungle, which combines metal and jazz and lots of other things. And he goes all over the place by doing like guttural fry stuff, regular clean singing, regular distorted singing, belted singing. He can do whistle tones. He can use distortion very high up in his range. So he basically does everything that any singer does on this list. You know, Chris Cornell, high distorted belting, he's got that. He's got the lows and stuff, some of the other guys. He's got the fry that Chester Bennington, he has everything basically. And I would personally just stick him right at number 2. If you were being really particular about technical things, you might just stick him on number 1 because he can do the most, he has the most broad talent of anybody. But, you know, there he is, of course. I want to think of a singer I could put there instead, but I have a hard time just coming up with that right off the top of my head. Chino Moreno, I think this is where we get, because I would have dropped him. I probably would have put him where Chester Bennington is. Because Deftones is alright. Good new... I hesitate to call them new metal because they don't really feel like a new metal band that much. They feel like some different alternative metal thing. Because they can be very groovy and things. They can also be a little bit pop and things like that. And Chino is not a power singer. That's something that's important to keep clear here. He is a character singer. He's going for a particular thing because he can get the very light, soft, whispery sounds into right immediately into a scream. And it's unexpected. His screams are not as loud as you might think, though. They're actually pretty quiet, very compressed. He's not trying to belt or anything. He's going for a very particular character thing. And that between that and the band's popularity is why he's on this list. I would put him lower, though. Eddie Vedder, I don't want him on the list. There's nothing... He's being put here because Pearl Jam is one of the best-selling artists on the face of the earth. And I think that is it. I think every other singer on this list is better than he is because he does the same thing that other people had already done and not as well. He uses the, you know, raised soft palate and the sound way too much. He's the precursor to Scott Stapp. That's all I can say. And while Lane was the first singer to really bring in that R sound into singing, he did it at the end of lines and was very tasteful with it, in particular with it. He didn't do it all the time. Eddie does it all the time. Sometimes you can't understand him, and I just don't like it. He is on here for popularity alone, and I just don't think he should be on here. Not in a top 10 list. And Serj, I think, is properly placed on this list. 4 is perfect for him because he's not quite as rangy with talent as, like, say, Mike Patton is, but he can do quite a lot of different things. He can do that soft whispery thing. He can do absolutely blood-curdling scary screams. He can do just, you know, plain good, well-compressed singing with a little bit of distortion. He's got his signature death growl. You hear from plenty of his songs that most people that have heard him will know what I mean by that. He has pretty good range. I mean, and he's also just incredibly unique with his delivery by also letting his Armenian roots come through in a lot of his singing style. Excuse me if I keep clearing my throat. It is a little bit scratchy right now because I've just been using it too much. Yeah, I think he is definitely properly placed on this list, and I have no arguments with that. Chris is at 3, which you guys know I'm already going to hate that. My opinion would be just stick him at number 1, stick him at number 1, stick him at number 1. Of course, what I said earlier, if you wanted to make the argument between him and Mike Patton being 1 and 2, okay, whatever. That's totally fine. If we're not making that argument, then Mike Patton is 2 and he is 1. So, that's where we are. I mean, I of course really like Soundgarden. They're my favorite band, obviously. They're why I do what I do. And Chris has all the things. He has quiet voice, very low baritone sound. He can do good compression and distortion at any part of his range. He's of course well known for his mid-range distorted belting, which is very difficult to do because it's incredibly physically demanding to do, especially as much as he does it. I don't know if there was anybody else in good enough physical condition to act, at the time he was at his prime to actually do what he was doing. And that's part of why it's so hard to do that stuff. Of course, he can get really high. He can go in falsetto, do stupid high head voice notes. He wants to. Even when he was, 50 years old, he could still hit the high note on Incessant Mace, which is completely dumb that at that age he could do that so easily. And Chris Cornell can sing anything. He can sing the phone book and you'll love it. Pretty much, that's the kind of singer he is. They had that classic Led Zeppelin kind of style. That one's always funny to point out to me because they weren't influenced by Led Zeppelin, and everybody thinks they were just because of how he sounded. Not true. In fact, he admits later in a 2013 interview that he had only recently started listening to Led Zeppelin. So, and that was 2013. So, you can see where it is. His early influences, of course, were the Beatles mainly, and then some of the other underground artists that came before the grunge scene, like, what are we talking about? Bad Brains, Black Flag, right? That's the name of the band, I think. And then British stuff like Bauhaus. So kind of weird stuff there. And then, of course, he has been known to say that a lot of his early inspiration for singing was a lot of R&B singers like Stevie Wonder and mainly Little Richard. Just very different, which did kind of lead to the Led Zeppelin style because R&B soul blues artists also influenced Led Zeppelin, although earlier ones than that. So that's how that could have happened that way. Anyway, him being at number 3 is not something I like, so I would definitely put him at 1. I would not put Maynard at 2. There's no way. Drop this man back down to where Mike Patton was placed for me, honestly. I know he's a really interesting singer. He's got a really cool tone. He's got good character, but I just don't think it's on the same level of stuff. Granted, I haven't heard his other band, Pucifer, which maybe he does a lot more different things with that one. I'm really only familiar with Tool and Imperfect Circle. I mean, the things that make him strong are like he's very good at fry screams. He's good at going between clean and distorted very quickly. He's very good at rhythmic singing and taking weird rhythms and being able to sing to them pretty well, which takes a lot of homework to be able to do that. So he's been very committed to what he does. He has a lot of different stylistic things he can pull from, like being really quiet, being louder, being belty, being distorted. Although his range is not very big compared to a lot of the guys on here. I mean, he can sound higher when he's doing like a distorted scream, but he really doesn't go up that high. I haven't heard him go particularly low compared. I just don't think he is quite at the level of some of these other guys technically, so I wouldn't have put him here. And then your number 1, if it'll load, there it goes, is Layne Staley on this list, which I'm not mad about, but of course I disagree with that. I would have put him at 3. Like I said, my top 3 would be Layne, Mike Patton, Chris Cornell, and everybody loves him. He's got a great voice, very soulful voice, which when you look at him might be unexpected. I'm good at that. Very good at getting compression and fry at any part of his range. He actually has a fairly large range. He can get pretty low when he wants to. He can get pretty high when he wants to. The highs you don't hear as much necessarily, but there's some pretty ridiculous head notes that he can hit and things like that. And of course, just pure mixed belting. He's a freak at that because it never sounds like there's any head voice. It sounds like it's just coming up from his stomach, from his gut and out. And I don't know a lot of singers that can just blast their voice out like that. He's one of the best live singers on this list, which is important to point out. I don't know if I've ever heard a bad live vocal from him. He does sing a little bit differently live usually. He's usually on a lot of stuff, his voice is darker and he might use a little bit more distortion or move it to a different place in his mouth. And I think he does that just because it's easier and sounds better live, maybe. I don't think it's any reason of him trying to avoid a particular kind of vocal from a record or anything like that. And he was pretty good all the way throughout his career. Although he did lose a lot of his ability to belt and things like that as his heroin addiction progressed. But what you get out of him, of course, is very good before that. Let's see, what would be my order? I don't have a problem with the first two are fine where they are. Then I probably would have gone Chino, Maynard, Chester, Surge. Eddie Vedder would just not be on here. And then the top three I said, which Lane, Mike Patton, Chris Cornell. Who would I replace Eddie Vedder with is the question. I gotta think pretty hard about that to remember an alternative singer that I know is good. I will cut to when I think of one. I have come back. Let's keep the theme going. Let's say I would get rid of Eddie Vedder and replace him with Josh Homme. Technically, that's a little bit weird since you have Mark Lanegan, who is technically in the Queens of the Stone Age with him. So that's two people in the same band, but most of his career was Screaming Trees and solo stuff with Mark Lanegan. So I think that's fine. So that would be my list there. The whatever they said the first one was, I forgot now. Oops. Then oh yeah, it was Scott Weiland, Mark Lanegan. Then I would put Chino, Maynard. You know what? Let's put Josh Homme before Maynard. So Maynard would be 5, he'd be 6. And then same order. And then Surge, where he was already. And then Lane, Mike Patton, Chris Cornell. And there would be my revised top 10 for this. I think they did a pretty good job with it, but there's some weird things I don't get. There's popularity of singers being valued too much and not fully understanding the technical abilities of every singer that have been mentioned, but you know, that's fine. At the end of the day, it's all opinion. Nobody really cares. It's a good 10 here. I don't know if order actually matters because it just says 10 strongest, so order may not matter, honestly, but anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video here, reacting to this list. Hope to do more videos like this one in the future. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Don't forget to click the notification bell to know when a new video is out. And I will see you guys next time for another video. Goodbye.